there's someone in the room next to me, and I don't want to bother them, so I'm going to be talking more quietly. But today, I want to go over first my legal writing material, because this is something I feel I understand the least at the moment, and so I want to make sure that I go over it just to ensure that I'm understanding it well. So today we talked about understanding cases, or rather working with cases to determine the rule of law. And from this, we were asked 5 questions about the chapter, which is, what's the difference between an emergent legal rule and an existing legal rule? We talked about the difference between a law-centered interpretation and a fact-based holding. We discussed what are the ways a case can process and interpret an existing legal rule. What role do factors play in it? Why are factors important? And that was pretty much it, but I want to go into some of the terms, because I think the terms can be a little confusing at first, but if we flesh it out a bit, it can be consolidated to make more sense. Okay, so let's go over an emergent legal rule versus an existing legal rule. So an emergent legal rule, well, let's start with an existing legal rule. An existing legal rule is, whether it comes from case law or enacted law, it's the first rule. It's what the case is going to abide by. But then you process a case, and the case details the facts, want to give that existing legal rule a little bit more detail. So that existing legal rule starts pretty broad, but then this case makes it a little bit more narrow so that you understand what's going to happen exactly. So that processing of a case results in an emergent legal rule. Okay, but so how does that happen? How do you process a case? Well, there's several ways that the court does it, and some of it is going to be explicit and other parts of it are going to be implicit, meaning you need to figure it out as it goes along. So what's the difference between a law-centered interpretation and a fact-based holding? Well, a law-centered interpretation is when the court speaks specifically about the rule of law. So let's just take an example rule, meaning the example is the dog is dangerous if it poses a threat to the community. So that's a law-centered interpretation because it's about law. So what's the fact-based holding? Well, a fact-based holding takes that rule of law, reveals what the facts are, and then uses that to reach a holding. So, a dog bites somebody. The dog happens to have sharp teeth because that's what dogs have, and it bit several people. So, the rule can be taken from the dog is dangerous if it poses a threat to community. You want to define what's a threat to a community. Well, the dog is a threat when it has sharp teeth and it has bitten several people. So if that's a threat, then the dog is dangerous. So fact-based holdings tend to be more specific. So you have law-centered interpretations, which are more broad, and then you have fact-based holdings, which are more specific. But how do you understand let's actually just talk about explicit and implicit guiding factors, because that's really how you determine whether or not, that's how you figure out what the rule is. So an explicit guiding factor is something that the court is going to tell you is a factor. It's pretty straightforward, meaning the court says if the dog has sharp teeth, then it's going to be considered a threat. Or if the dog has bitten several people, it's going to be considered a threat to the community. So those are very specific and explicit of what the court's going to say. What can we infer from that? And that's really where we're going to be getting a little bit more broad, is what category does that fall under? So if a dog has sharp teeth, it's going to be Well, the category is sharpness of teeth. Now that I'm saying that, it doesn't sound quite right. Let me explore a different example real quick. Say, for example, a court says that if you have vacated a property for more than a year, such and such can happen to the property. Well, what's the category or the implicit analysis from that? Well, you're wanting to look at the length of time. So it's an implicit factor that you're considering the length of time. The explicit factor is how specific the time needs to be. That's how I understand it. There may be more for me to learn there. It's something that'll clear it up. But that's how it is in my mind right now. And I will let you know if anything changes. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Law Schoolers. Before I let you go, there are 4 things I want to say. The first thing is if you enjoyed these episodes and if you enjoyed the website, I would invite you to go and join Law Schoolers Pro. And you can do that by going to lawschoolers.com/join. It's a way for you to support us, but there's also a lot of features there that I think you will enjoy. Second thing is that nearly all of our episodes are unedited. The only ones that aren't are pre-law materials, and the reason for that is so you can actually see the legal material in its raw form as I'm learning it as well. The third thing is that the information contained in these episodes are specifically only for educational purposes. They're not to be used as legal advice, and with that, the fourth thing is if it is used as legal advice, we are not liable. That is, Law Schoolers is not liable for any legal outcomes. Thank you again for enjoying the show. Have a good one.